I'll just start by saying, wow. How the heck do I follow that? But I've had good training. I used to run school assemblies, and my job was to speak last. And I had to look at the watch, and I had to make sure we were finished by the time lunchtime started, because the boys would all be wanting to get out. So I got pretty good at timing it so that I could speak for 5 minutes or I could speak for 15 minutes, whatever. So firstly, I'd like to welcome a few people. I think it's really a significant occasion to be able to welcome Claire tonight, which has already been mentioned, and Toby, who is our new CEO to the National Council. And I know Tony Nicholson is here somewhere, the chair for the VCV board. So I'm very happy to have all of them here tonight, as well as our guest speakers. And they didn't disappoint. I think that all the things that I knew already about the fact that they had courage, they would be challenging, I think we heard all of that for ourselves tonight. So I'm not going to repeat that. And I'm not going to try and summarise what they've said. You've heard all of that. But I will try and link it into what I had prepared to say. But I think they've probably picked the same things I wanted to say. I think the first thing, but I will pick out that Geraldine did say right at the start that change is possible. With focus and with examining our culture, change is possible. And I think I'll come back to that. And I think Francis said some things also. He also talked about culture. And it just happens to be that's what I want to focus on tonight. And some of the words might be a bit challenging. And I know there are a couple of the clergy here tonight, and it's not meant to disparage them in any way. So I'll give that disclaimer before I start. When we came up with this topic, I thought, what is it about our Catholic culture that explains why things have happened? And that's a pretty important question, I think. We've talked about, we've listened to a lot about culture, but I think let's talk about what it is in our Catholic culture. And I came up with 2 stories from my own life and a third story which is more recent. The first story was when I was about 19 or 20. I came home and told my mother I had been invited to be best man at one of my mates' weddings. And I thought, she'll say, wow, that's good, fantastic. But she said, have you asked permission? And I thought, why would I ask permission? And the penny dropped. My friend was nominally C of E or Anglican. He was marrying a girl who was Methodist, and the wedding was going to be in a Methodist church. Okay, big deal. And my mum came from a family where my grandfather was Anglican, and she tells stories of the fact when she was younger, she was not allowed to go to weddings within the family if they were inside Anglican churches, and that included her cousin who was her best friend. And I thought all the people, my mum would understand that I don't need to ask permission to do this. I think she was a bit shocked, but she did get over it. So that was my first thing, and I'll come on to why I've picked these 2 stories in a minute. The second story is a little bit later in life. I moved from a state school into teaching in a Catholic school. And there's an enormous culture change doing something like that. And for my sins, I ended up teaching in a girls' school, which was run by the nuns. And I went in with great trepidation. I didn't know how I was going to go teaching all girls, but it actually worked out all right. But a term into the year, I was called to the principal's office, and I thought, what hidden rule have I broken here? There's got to be some bad thing about going to the principal's office. But she was offering me a job, a leadership job in the school, taking over from one of the nuns. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a bit of a challenge. And I learnt very quickly that if I wanted to do things, it was going to be much harder for me to get parents across the line than it would be if the good sister who'd preceded me said that it had to be done. And it did work out. This sister was very supportive and a very wise person. She just said to me early days, you're on your own. And I thought, well, that's good. And I think the third example is much more recent. The third example is when I sat down with Julie. Initially, and this is no insult to the man, we were going to say, look, we've got a new Archbishop, let's invite him to do our Ozanam conversation this year. And I thought, no, it is not the statement to have somebody who is a cleric getting up and telling us how lay Catholics should move ahead. And that was not meant to be in any insult to him, and I hope at some stage we can get him along to an occasion and rightly acknowledge his role in leadership in the church. But we've got a role as well. What I'd like to term those three examples is lay Catholic culture cringe. And everyone in the room who's my age or older, and most of you are my age or older, knows what I mean by that. And I've just listed down a few things, but we could probably add lots of others. It was drummed into us as kids, and obviously to my mother, that the priest, the brother, the sister was a source of all wisdom, particularly in matters religious. They had all the trappings to make sure that they were seen as superior. They dressed differently. They lived in a better house. Our presbytery was 2 stories when every house around it was 1 story. They had, and I'll come back, I love Francis' comment about canon law. They had canon law to back up any challenge that we put to them. And one of my great disappointments with the plenary council is when nationally we put something to we should have been demanding, but we were asking for a seat in the next stage of those deliberations. The barrier was canon law won't allow it. Well, I think, what a lot of rubbish. Let's argue it on its merits, not fall back on canon law. And there are probably other things too. They had all these other rules which now no longer apply. We weren't allowed to eat meat, or we might end up going to hell. All those things which we now think, well, where did that disappear? How can that suddenly stop being important? So it's been drummed into us right from the time we were small, reinforced by our parents. This is what being a Catholic means. We defer to the brother, the sister, the nun. And I think that I came back to the question, why were we unaware that there were so many dreadful things happening in our church? And I went to a Catholic school. I moved in circles where I know now that there were instances of pedophilia. I did not know what was happening. And I liken it to the fact that I did a lot of study when I was at university on the Holocaust. And people who lived through that period in Germany really did not know what was happening. Now, whether they closed their eyes to it or not, I don't know. But I feel as lay Catholics, we have been led into this position by being brought up to give deference to the clergy. And I think the first step we have to make, particularly if you're my age or older, we have to acknowledge that and say we're not going to do that any longer. It's okay to challenge father. It's okay to challenge brother. Not that too many brothers and sisters are around now in the schools for kids, but it's our obligation to stand up and say, let's argue things on their merit. Let's not decide them simply because father, sister, brother has said so. So last year I chose the theme of saying we have to let our light shine. I think it's even more important that we do that now. But I think we have another thing to do. We have to establish ourselves a new culture. And that culture has to be, I'll pick a few key words, you can probably add your own. It has to be challenging. It has to be critical. It has to be independent. And it has to be based on gospel values which we can interpret for ourselves. We don't need someone to tell us what those things mean. We've got them, we look at them in our conference meetings, and we know very clearly what they are and how we should apply them. Sorry, we've been talking all day, so my throat's getting a bit dry. And I'd like to finish off, it is after all Frederick Ozanam's name that we've used for this conversation, and I'll thank Julie for this comment because I think it does pick up some of the other themes that we've heard tonight. Frederick Ozanam wrote, "Do not be afraid of new beginnings. Be creative. Be inventive." I can't read my own writing, isn't it terrible? "You who have energy and enthusiasm and want to do something of value for the future, do it now. Launch out, do not wait." And I think the time has come for us to reclaim, to do all of the things I've been talking about, hold our heads high, and I think some of the questions brought this out. We should be proud to be Catholic. We are in an organisation that is one of the organisations that has everything to be proud of, and we should say, for the whole world, we do great stuff. We're not ashamed of it, and we're also proud to be Catholic doing it. Thank you.